In the history of the church, if you study church history and all of the many hundreds of errors and traps that the church has almost fallen into again and again, and every breakaway and sect and cult that has come out of Christ's church, every major error that has threatened to derail the gospel and threatened to sink Christ's church over the last 2,000 years, every major area comes down to this passage. Getting this passage wrong is the root of every major error in the history of the church. Because if you get the person of Jesus wrong and you get the work of Jesus wrong, you're going to get the gospel wrong and you're going to lose everything. And this paragraph here in Colossians is the great summary of who Jesus is and what he has done for us. And at the heart of all that we do, this truth is our great foundation. Certainly that was the temptation, this was the struggle that was facing the church in Colossae, that they were in danger of getting the identity of Jesus and the work of Jesus wrong. And if they had done that, they would have lost the gospel. And so Paul speaks more strongly in this letter than any other on the person and work of Jesus. Many scholars say this is the greatest Christological paragraph in the New Testament. And it's given to the Colossians because they were in great danger of losing sight of who Jesus was. They were in danger of falling into, as chapter 2 says in verse 8 and verse 16, these hollow and deceptive philosophies, human traditions, religious rituals, the fashionable and the more tangible religions and cultural practices of the day were the great temptation for the Colossians and continue to be the great temptation for God's people. We may think this is pretty straightforward stuff. We may think this is pretty obvious stuff. But actually, this is where the root of where things go wrong. Sadly, far too often, the church will build their ministry based on where their society is at rather than where the gospel is at and where Christ is at. And this happens to the pastor and this happens to the people in the church as well. If a church is not well grounded in these truths, it will drift away. I was telling your previous pastor, actually, just a little while ago, not to swell his head up too much, but the very fact that you guys are still here means that he's done his job well, that he's built you on these foundations, and that it was all driven by his personality and his trendiness. You guys would have all drifted away to find some other trendy person. If a church is not built on these truths, it's going to easily buy into something else. And a pastor is actually often tempted to do this as well, because you're always tempted to think your ministry is not edgy enough or your ministry is not connecting to where people are really at, and you need to find some sort of gimmick or trick or hook to get people to come, because they're going to get tired of hearing you talk about Jesus who died on the cross for their sins every Sunday. That's the great temptation, that you need to find something else, because people have moved on from that. And you've got to find something that's going to grab them. And the temptation also comes to people in the pews, in the chairs, because you'll be constantly tempted to think that what I'm hearing is not actually really helping me anymore. What I'm hearing is not really actually where I'm at right now. I've moved on from that. I've got something else. I've got other issues in my life. And over this last couple of years, perhaps we've been feeling a little bit at sea and a little bit disconnected from everything. And you're thinking, maybe something's missing in my life. Maybe I need to do something different to get back to where I was, to get back on track. And then you think to yourself, well, maybe I should go to John's church. He's got that great life coach there. And everyone seems to be so excited about him. Maybe I'll go listen to that guy. Or maybe you're thinking, I must go to Sheila's little group on a Friday, because they go through the old Jewish rituals and they have this like little Sabbath service, and maybe that's what I'm missing. Maybe I need to do that. And those are the kind of little subtle temptations that, if they get into your head, will take you away from the head, that is Jesus, and what he has done for you. You see, the subtext behind all of this is the nagging feeling that always comes to us that maybe Jesus isn't enough, that maybe we need to do something else, that maybe we're missing something. And that was the trap that the Colossians were in danger of falling into. and why they are gifted this beautiful passage in Colossians chapter 1. Now, I've just got two things to tell you this morning from this passage. It is rich in depth, and I know that in many ways we'll be scratching the surface today. But these two things are great truths that anchor us and our faith. And they're about Jesus, who is Lord, and Jesus, who is Savior, basically. That he is Lord, firstly, and that is Lord of all creation. He is Lord of all creation. He is the image, verse 15 says, of the invisible God. That word image is literally the word icon. It is a visible representation of something, a visible representation of something unseen, like a face of Caesar on a coin. It was referred to in the first century. But it refers to something that, a representation of something. Now, a lot of people have said over the years, different scholars have said, that means that somehow Jesus is a lesser representation of God, but that misses the understanding of what icon means. That misses the understanding of what the context is saying here. I mean, if I showed you a picture of my daughter and or my son and said, like, here they are, here's a picture of them. Every good parent and grandparent's got pictures of their kids, don't they, and grandchildren. You're not going to look at that and go, oh, so that's a picture of someone who's less than your son. You're not going to, that's a picture of someone who's less than your daughter. You're not going to say that. It's a picture of who they really are. This is a picture of them. And this is what Paul is saying here, that if you want to see who Jesus is, if you want to see who God is, here's the photograph. Come and have a look at it. And when you see the photograph of God, it'll look like Jesus. It'll look like Jesus. That's what he's saying. Come and have a look at the picture. Jesus is God made visible. If you want to see who God is, you look at Jesus. He is no less than God. He is the visible picture of who God is. If you took Jesus' fingerprints and you ran them through the computer at Home Affairs, hopefully it'll find that the identity of Jesus is none other than God himself. Jesus is God made visible. And Jesus occupies that God position. Everything in this passage tells you that everything Jesus does is God, is what God does. He is the firstborn of all creation. And again, don't misunderstand what this language means. This is not talking about a chronological thing. It's not talking about he's the first created thing. It's talking about a title or position. In that ancient world, the firstborn inherited everything. If you were the firstborn in the family, you get everything. Wouldn't that be great if you were the firstborn? Sorry for your younger brother who gets absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. The firstborn got everything. And so the picture here is of that title of priority, that Jesus is not the first created thing, but he is first over all created things. That's the picture here. And if you're still not convinced of that, well, what's the golden rule of literary interpretation? Context, context, context. The whole point of the hymn is to show that Jesus is not created, but creator. Verse 16, for in him or by him, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. Everything here is about Jesus as creator. That word all things, by the way, it appears about 7 times in this little paragraph. All things can refer, the language refers to like the completeness of something or the totality of something, the fullness of something. Every single thing, seen and unseen, is created by Jesus. Everything in all creation, seen and unseen, visible and invisible, is created by Jesus. And he talks about thrones and dominions and rulers and authorities. Those are visible and invisible things, which, as we'll see next time, was quite an issue for the Colossians. They were getting caught up with angels and demons and thinking that they needed to harness the power of some to battle others and so on, get angels on your side, tackle demons and all those kind of things. And they were being distracted from actually who Jesus really is. And there were some who even said Jesus was the top angel, which is still, by the way, the teaching in certain cults like the Jehovah's Witnesses today. Paul says Jesus is above all powers, above all dominions, creator and ruler of all creatures, seen and unseen, creator of all rulers of this world and the invisible one. Everything was created by him, and everything was created for him. Do you see how he goes on to say that? All things were created through him or by him, you could translate that, and for him. That's very significant. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, because, we're very into kind of making our world suit us, making things comfortable for ourselves, designing things that suit us, chairs that we can sit in. People talk about cars, like trendy cars are ergonomically designed, where the seat kind of wraps around you in 17 different ways and makes you coffee and stuff like that. Everything is designed for you and your comfort, for you to fit in, except for bicycle seats, I think. But otherwise, everything else, I would say, is designed for us. We try and make things work like that. And the things that you buy that work best for you are the things that fit into your life and the way you want to do things. And so that kind of thinking is we make life fit us. But the reality is everything in creation is actually designed to fit Jesus. Everything is designed for him. Now think about this. The Creator created all of creation by him and for him, Jesus. That means everything is designed to fit into him, which means creation is designed for Jesus, the perfect human being. You see, there's a sense in which all of us don't quite fit into creation. It doesn't quite work for us because creation was not designed for sinners. We break creation. We don't fit into it. And there's something about us. We mess things up in this world. We don't actually make it work for ourselves. And when we do make it work for ourselves, we leave a garbage patch the size of Australia in the Pacific Ocean. We don't actually make things work for us. It doesn't fit. We mess it up. We can't quite get a hold of creation. We can't quite get a hold of even our relationships. Even the best of our relationships have struggles. They don't quite work. There's often terrible sadness often in certain relationships, even within family, even with marriage. Even the best of your marriage doesn't quite click. It doesn't always run well. You've got to work at it. And even then, it's still, things break and things don't work. Family conflicts, people not talking to each other. Nothing in the world quite works for us sinners. Nothing works perfectly. There's no perfect political system, no perfect welfare system, no perfect education system. There's no perfect job. There's no perfect student. Everything is a struggle. There's nothing. It just flows. We are given a sense every single day that something is not right, that we don't quite fit it, that we don't quite get it. We can't get hold of our time properly. We can't get hold of our... You guys definitely can't get hold of your time. We started off as 9, don't we? These are all signs that we're not quite fitting in here. It's not clicking. There's moments where it will work. There's moments where it will work, but either we mess it up or somebody will mess it up for us. Nothing quite works. And you know why? Because creation was not made for sinners. Creation was made for humans, but a perfect human. Creation works when a perfect human fits into it, because it's fitted for a perfect human. Adam and Eve failed to be that, and Jesus succeeded. And here's the thing. If you are in Jesus, you are being fitted into creation that will work. You'll be fitted into creation that will work, because you are fitted into the Creator for whom creation was made for. Isn't that awesome? The missing piece of the puzzle here is Jesus. And when you fit into him, you fit into the creation as it was meant to be. Not this broken creation, of course, but the new creation. And it is good to know that Jesus is Lord of the new creation too. So have a look, secondly, at Jesus, Lord of the new creation. Verse 18, he is the head of the body, the church. The church is the new creation. The ecclesia, the word is the gathering, the gathered people of God. We're not talking about a building, we're talking about people. This new creation is the church. And Jesus is the head of that too, just as he is head of all creation. He's the one who is head of the new creation. By the way, this is something very important not to miss as we look at these next few verses. People often think, because we see it the way it is today, that the church is kind of like a subset of creation. Like this is a little part of creation, the church of Jesus Christ. And that the world, like if you imagine the size of Bergfleet High School premises now, is like the world, and the church is like this little gymnasium hall. And the church just fits in this part. That's not actually what is being said here. The reality is, soon the new creation will be all creation. This little addendum that the world sees, this, in some parts of the world, this irritating little addendum of religion, and then these Christians, and this little church of real believers who meet in this little corner here. We may seem to be an addendum, but actually the new creation will soon be all creation. Soon everything will be the new creation. And those in Jesus will supersede this old sinful world. So what Paul is saying here is what's going to happen in eternity. What you're seeing a fraction of now is what's going to be in totality in the new life to come. And Jesus is Lord of that creation too. Verse 18, he's the head of the body of the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead. And again, that same language, firstborn, the title. He is the head. He is the first over the church, just like he is first over all creation. He is first over the new creation. And that same word. So that in all things he might have the supremacy or the preeminence, the verse goes on to say. In other words, he is the number one. It's a position. It's not a chronological thing. He is the one who is head of the new creation. It can only be that is God's position held visibly by Jesus as you see him. Like verse 19 says, and this really does capture it. For in him all of the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. That word fullness is a key word in the letter to the Colossians because it was a word the false teachers loved to use. The false teachers would say, oh, you've only got Jesus. Shame. You know, you're missing out on so many other things that you could have. You're missing out on so much that you really could have, but you've got Jesus. Oh, shame. You're missing out on so much more. And then you think, oh, maybe I am. Maybe I need to go and see this guy. Maybe I need to go to this church. Maybe I need to hear that person. And the sad thing is, that doesn't just happen in church circles, it happens in the world. Because the world does the same thing to you. The world will say the same thing to you. Oh, you follow Jesus. Shame, you're missing out on the fullness of life. You're missing out because you're following Jesus. You're missing out on the fullness of life's pleasures. You're missing out on the fullness of life's delights. You're missing out on the fullness of the deep secrets. You're missing out on the fullness of sexual satisfaction. You're missing out on the fullness of power, of popularity, of acceptance, of influence, of success, of love, and so on. The world will want you to think that you are getting less when you've got Jesus. Whereas the gospel says if you've got Jesus, you have the fullness of everything that God has designed you to have in all creation and God himself. If you have Jesus, you have the fullness beyond anything this world can ever offer you. Because if Jesus has made us for himself, then nothing else will satisfy. But it's an illusion that you're losing the fullness. It's an illusion that there is fullness out there. It's an illusion that people keep falling for. It's an illusion and a temptation that people keep falling into. That somehow this is not the fullness and that is. But it cannot be if, as the great church father Augustine of Africa, of Algeria, said, his most famous quote, Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their peace in you. We're made for him. We're made to find the fullness of life in him. And all of these illusions will end in tears. Jesus is Lord over all creation, and Jesus is Lord of the new creation, and he makes us part of that new creation. How does he make us part of that new creation? Verse 20. And through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. How does Jesus bring sinners like us in a broken creation into the new creation? Through the act of reconciliation, the act of making peace between sinners like us and a holy God. How? Through his blood shed on the cross. In other words, through his death on our behalf. This is the great central act of reconciliation, Jesus going to the cross for us. This is what we're building up to over this Lent period as we move towards Easter. This is what we are being reminded of, that Christ himself, the creator of all, took on human flesh and took on our fallen creation, our failures and the sin, then the wrath that we deserved upon himself, and made peace with the God of wrath, who poured it out on Jesus instead of us. He has reconciled us. He has reconciled us. Gosh, doesn't our world need reconciliation at the moment? Isn't it tearing itself apart yet again because we are trying to make creation fit our sinful desires instead of submitting to God, the Creator? Our world is tearing itself apart. Politically, wars up in Ukraine and around the world, anger and division. Our world needs reconciliation. And the great reconciliation has been accomplished in Jesus. And the only hope of reconciliation with each other comes when that is first. When we make peace with God, we'll understand better how to make peace with each other. And Jesus has accomplished that for us in the person, in his work on the cross. And that's what you and I have to come back to again and again. As tempted as we are to think we need to find something else, no, you need to come back to this. You need to come back to this. You get this wrong, everything else is going to fall apart. You get this wrong, everything else is not going to work. How do we respond? Just briefly, the next few verses. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled, there's the word again, reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. Jesus has done all of the work. Jesus has done it all. He has done the work of reconciling sinners like us to God by his death. There's nothing you and I need to do. But trust him. But trust him. That's what he comes back to the Colossians. Jesus has done this for you, and this is yours, verse 23, if you continue in your faith, established and firm, not moving from the hope held out for you in the gospel. Don't move to this guy saying you need this. Don't move to this person and say you're missing out on this. Don't go to these people say you're losing out on the fullness of this. Don't go to these people who say, wow, come to us, then you're really going to see what life is like. Stay firm in your faith in Jesus. Hold on to him. He's done it all. Hold on to him. This is the gospel. And this is the gospel that we have to keep coming back to, my friends, because time after time we will be tempted to look for something else in subtle ways. And we'll find ourselves moving away from Jesus our Lord and Jesus our Savior.